There we go. Excellent. So thank you everybody for joining us for our June resource group. We're so excited to be having our contributor spotlight shining on Andy Mansinne today. And we'll kind of walk through our usual housekeeping before we dive into the interview to learn a little bit more about who he is and how he got into the beer business. I always want to take a second to talk about why we're here. And just briefly, we're raising the bar for startups through education, also lending that education to growing breweries, and in turn, lowering the barrier to entry for those without access or without the resources. So kind of doing both at the same time. And so pleased and gratified to have all the support that we do from our supporters and sponsors. We have a lot of stuff coming up, not quite as much as the long list I had last time because we were about to launch into CBC. But last Tuesday and this Tuesday on our podcast, I wanted to share with everybody, we've been diving into your business plan. And this last Tuesday was equipment and infrastructure, which turned into part one because the conversation got to be way deep and awesome. And so we asked everybody to come back for part two. So part two will be loading next Tuesday. So but in both of those, you'll see Alex Smith from ABS Commercial. You'll see Brian Mullahan from Ruby Street Brewing and Chris Leach from Wild Goose Filling. So awesome conversations there. And All About Beer is our partner with all of our podcasts, helping to make that possible. Our next resource group is July 12th. That's going to be Brandon Hernandez from San Diego Beer News. Brandon's been in the industry forever and has amazing stories to tell. And then our next educational webinar is going to be August 16th. And that is Jeff O'Brien. And he's going to talk to us. He says, show me the money. And he's going to talk about how to raise investment capital for your brewery legally, which is fairly important. Next week, we're going to be in San Diego at HomebrewCon. So if you're going to be there or in San Diego at all, please let us know. We have a panel that we're talking about essential prep for building a business plan. And Candace is going to be on that panel, Dustin Hauk from Hauk Architecture, Brooke Bristow from Bristow Beverage Law, and Will Camacho from Harvest and Cultivate. So all those things are coming up. Housekeeping wise, Andy has said he's happy to take questions as we go today. And so we'll kind of go through our interview and discuss his focus on leading and succeeding with your distributor. And then, we'll continue to take questions on that as for what we have. And then we're happy to dive into any other questions or anything else that comes up for fun. So Andy, let's start with an intro. Let's learn about you, your name, company name, title, role, location, and what do you like to do when you're not involved in beer?
Laura, thanks for having me and being able to represent Brand Elixir Partnership. I'm the founder and president of Brand Elixir, and we are four partners. All of us have worked together and are friends and have come from various parts of the beverage alcohol industry, and I know we'll get that into in a minute. But I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been here for almost 30 years. It's so hard to say that. But I was recruited from Chicago, and we had just had an 18-month-old, our oldest daughter Meredith, and our youngest Caroline was born in Louisville. But I was brought down with Brown-Forman Corporation, makers of Jack Daniels, among other things, and to really spend my career there about 16 years with all in the wine side of things. So had a great experience, traveled the world, ran businesses all over the world. But 2 years ago, myself and my three other partners came together to start Brand Elixir, which is really focused on helping craft brands scale the three-tier system. We've seen a huge issue in our own lives with, trying to be entrepreneurial, trying to be innovative. And when you have really great ideas, but you can't break through that third wall of distributors, it can get really frustrating. And we thought, what if we could put our heads together and our experiences together and help these brands kind of be a little smarter, a little sharper, a little faster, we could help them measure their success. And I'm just glad I'm here today. This is great.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming. And you've addressed there a little bit about what you do with and for clients. What's your specific mission of the four of you? I know you all have different strengths and experiences.
Yeah. So our mission is we exist. Our elevator speech is we exist to help craft brands scale effectively and efficiently through the three-tier system. And where it gets a little maybe thorny is that we know that there really isn't a straight line between I got a great idea and I'm going to be successful with distributors. And so the reason why we have four of us is we bring to bear all of our many decades of skill sets into one situation to help our clients. So for example, I tend to lean on marketing and strategy because I grew up in classic consumer packaged goods marketing, and that was sort of my overdeveloped muscle. Joe Cars, one of our partners, spent 24 years at Jim Beam, and he also has marketing, but he's very heavily experienced in operations. And so we lean on Joe with operations and marketing and strategy. Jeff Musial, who's here today, a dear friend for many decades. He grew up both at Brown-Forman, but also in the beer business at AB InBev, and he has significant marketing experience. But his key skill set is brand insights and market research. So Jeff literally can bring the consumer perspective through both quantitative research and qualitative research, bring that to bear to increase the knowledge pool and insights for our client brands. And lastly, Greg Vogler is a creative. He has his own agency. We worked very closely with Greg when Joe and I were at MGP building their first ever consumer portfolio from scratch. And it just so happens that Jeff, while he was he has his own market research firm, we basically hired Jeff to be our outside but in-house market research department. So together, all four of us built the MGP portfolio over the last 6 years from literally zero to national brands. So it's been a lot of fun. So we wear the scars that all of you entrepreneurs wear as well. We've been there. We know what it's like to kind of claw and pick and shovel your way to build your brand and scale. So we feel like we can talk the language because we have the scars as well.
Awesome. So individually, what's your story? How did you start in the alcohol business? Was that just purely background of schooling and education, and was wine a passion to start?
Wine has always been a passion for me, but my journey has been fairly interesting. Let me a little background on me. I'm an Army brat. My dad was a career Army officer. We lived literally all over the world, and we were fortunately exposed to different cultures and different foods. And my dad being not quite off the boat Italian, his dad was, but we spoke Italian at home. We were traditional in the sense of lasagna Sunday nights and a lot of wine, and it really piqued my interest. But when I met my wife, by the way, I should tell you that Jeff and Greg are St. Louisans, and I met my wife in St. Louis at Ralston Purina Company, and Sally and I had been married, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. We just had our oldest child, Meredith. And we were sitting, we were on a quick vacation to Arizona where her parents had retired. And I said to her, I want to get in the wine business. I just, I want to go back to school and I want to be a winemaker and I want to go to UC Davis. And she looked at me like, wait a minute, we just got this massive mortgage on a house in Chicago. You've just had a child. That ain't happening. What's a plan B, Andrew? And lo and behold, these things always happen to me in life. But Number one is I get a call from a neighbor who had a friend at Heilemann Brewing, which happened to be headquartered in Chicago at the time, and they needed help. They were coming out of bankruptcy. They were just bought by a private equity firm. And lo and behold, I come in and have a meeting with these guys, and they end up saying, "Hey, could you start on Monday?" And it was a lot of fun, right? It was as entrepreneurial and bootstrapping as you could get. And so I took over old style beer and special export beer. And for those of you in the Midwest, and those of you, sorry, Jeff, are Cub fans, Jeff's grandfather was Stan Musial, the great Hall of Famer from the St. Louis Cardinals. If you go to Wrigley Field, half of Wrigley you're drinking Bud, and the other half you're drinking Old Style. And so, my mission was to really turn the business around and try to get it to relevancy again in Chicago and the surrounding Midwest, which was Iowa and Wisconsin, especially, was really the heavy areas for Old Style, and we were successful in doing that. We got it back into Wrigley Field. We were battling Bud Light for number one, number two, but it was just a great experience because it's a meritocracy. I believe the beverage industry is a meritocracy, and when we did things right, we got the accolades and the support of our distributors, and when we did things wrong, the other side happened. You get the nasty phone calls, but during that time, this is before really the emergence of craft beer. We're trying to look at other ways to fill capacity at the brewery in La Crosse, but also how to do unique things for consumers in Chicago. We came up with, guess what, an amber ale. The brewmasters in La Crosse were German by descent, and they loved to experiment. So we created Chicago's, what we like to call it, their very first craft beer. Before Goose Island, before all 312, before all those guys, it came from little old Heilemann, and it was called Windy City Amber Ale. And we launched it at all the Lighthouse bars down in Rush Street and Division, and we found an old beer cart, horse-drawn, and we delivered our first cases by hand to the distributors. With the distributors to the bars. It was a huge success, and it's one of the best, most fun experiences I've ever had. That's how I got into beverage alcohol, through beer, and through that experience. By the way, Highland was sold to another private equity firm, and I was left trying to find a job on the following Monday. But it led me to being recruited by Brown-Forman. So all good things lead to better things.
Yes, absolutely. And so today, I think you've cast your net a little wider, right? So you're kind of back into casting out for beer as well as wine and cider and mead and other.
Yeah. So brand Elixir, again, when we talk about craft brands, we really are talking about craft beverage brands across the spectrum. So I mentioned Jeff has extensive experience in beer. I have, I've got experience, and we've touched with some beer clients in the past. We are working with a wine client right now in Southern California who actually has a distribution management issue, and we're working with them to smooth out that curve. But along the way, they're realizing that there's some strategic opportunities that they have, so we're working with them on that. We're working with agave-based clients. I'm not going to say tequila because it's not, but it's agave-based. We're working with craft whiskey consumers. So we run the gamut. And what's interesting, right, is that all of us are dealing with the same thing, right? All those beer, wine, and spirit, they all start as a beer, right? Your mash, you start with your mash fermentation, which is called beer still. Wine is sort of a beer when you start fermentation, but everybody starts with a process that has to go through multiple stages before you can get it to the consumer. So we look at craft beverages in a holistic way because we're all trying to break through, to scale the business, scale to consumers and scale to customers. And so we feel that the the models that we've built, and really the principles in which we build our brands and our businesses apply across the board.
That totally makes sense. You've talked about really cool projects. How about the most complex or problematic project? I know we talked about the industry as a whole is shifting, but before this, what has been the most complex or problematic situation you've faced?
Yeah, I would tell you that the MGP experience was really the most complex, because that was literally, and I'm not exaggerating, the CEO, who Jeff knows as well, Gus Griffin, great guy. We were all friends together at Brown-Forman. He was the CEO at MGP, and he called and said, "Look, we've got this opportunity sauce issue. We got to create our own portfolio." And I said, "Great. What are the roles and responsibilities?" And he literally showed me a blank piece of paper. He says, "Here it is, and don't screw up." And so I literally had to start from scratch with strategy, with process, with systems. Not to mention what brands are you going to create, how are you going to create them, how are you going to distribute them, and because MGP was in and of itself a commodity company. It distilled pharmaceutical alcohol. It was founded during World War II as a distiller of high test ethanol for what? Torpedoes. It made torpedo propellant. And so we had to change an entire organization to think about the consumer and think about the three-tier system, when before all they had to do was distill and age whiskey and distill and bottle and tank up, what we call GNS, grain neutral spirits. And they entered into a whole new phase of their lives of, we're going to be in the business of building brands. So it was very complex, but absolutely one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had.
Remind me what MGP stands for.
It's Midwest Grain Products, but it literally goes by MGP now. They're the largest distiller in the country, world's largest rye distiller. They have two distilleries. Their historic whiskey distillery is in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which is about 20 miles west of Cincinnati, right on the banks of the Ohio River. It was actually built in 1847 by a gentleman from Cincinnati by the name of George Ross. But it was really made famous after Prohibition by Seagram's, by a Seagram's company. That's where Seagram 7 has been made for 100 years. It's just this massive brick, collection of brick buildings, brick warehouses, and a distillery that runs literally 24/7, 365.
Wow.
A true industrial complex.
Yes, I hear you. All right, well, let's get into your 5 tips and tricks or best practices for your leading and succeeding with distribution. I'm excited to learn from you here.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, these are 5 principles that we at Brand Elixir literally live by, because we've had to discover them ourselves, and we feel are fundamental to any craft business that is in the scaling mode. And so, the first one, and really where we start at the beginning, is pricing for profit. And what we mean by pricing for profit is really understanding the fundamentals of how you're pricing, but how your P&L is laid out. And I guess the fastest way to describe that is you need to know what your gross profit per case is, whether you're doing 24 bottles or cans of beer, or you're doing 6, 750s of whiskey. You really need to understand clearly what your GP per case is, because if you know the GP per case, you will be able to make really good, really smart decisions when you need to make them, right? Because you think through, you're running your brewery, and local event comes and says, "Hey, we'd love for you to spend, $5,000, and we'll have your name and lights, and you can sell all your beer." Well, I'm sorry, I'm about to lose my head pieces here, I think, but if you don't understand your GP per case, and you spend $5,000, and you can only sell 5 cases as a result, you've operated in a loss. So that becomes a real issue. The second thing is acting strategically. And what we mean by strategically is that you want to know the difference between spending and investing, right? Investing behind your brand implies a long-term return for the actions that you take. And that can be investing in local festivals. It can also be investing with your distributor in the market, right? Behind your brand and behind your programs. And so we have some models that we use with our clients on your payback, on your return on investment. These are simple models we use that are good little sort of back of the envelope metrics to make, just to make sure you guys are, our clients are thinking financially and thinking, along the right way. But the strategic mission, right, is always about how am I going to scale my brand for the long term? What is the intent and what is the impact on both my consumer and my customer constituency? The third is metric setting. And when we talk about metric setting, what we really mean is we call it, I think everyone's heard this, but using SMART goals, right? SMART. And that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And if you stick with those, you really will never fail. And we do this all the time with our distributors, right? It's, hey, Mr. Distributor, right? We want to talk to you about building displays in the off-premise for Q3, right? So specific, right? And what we want to do is we want to move our business from, you're currently running us at, I'm going to make it up, at 1,000 cases a quarter, and we want to be at 1,500 cases a quarter, all right? How are we going to do that? Well, we need 500 cases more this quarter, and we're going to focus on our top 10 retailers, but we're also going to focus on our top 10 bars and restaurants that, know us, and we're going to run promotion, specific promotion against all of those. So it's relevant, it's for the period, right? So smart, so specific, right? Measurable, we know that we're going to get to 500, right? It's achievable, we know we can measure that because of run rates. Relevant, this is this period, let's call it, it's going to be in and around 4th of July. And then time bound is, we got 6 weeks to make this done. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure every week what our performance is on Friday. And if there's a problem, by Monday, we'll have an answer that you guys can respond to. So those are the kind of the things that we work with our clients. The fourth is managing the execution to achieve profitable volume. And those are the unique things, the innovation that you can apply to your business on an everyday basis, right? So let's talk about distributors. So, a lot of people say, well, my distributor doesn't return my phone call, or my distributor doesn't, let me do ride along. Well, great. Go to that market, introduce yourself, bring in pizzas one day. We've had clients who have literally pulled up a barbecue truck to a distributor on a Friday and said, lunch is on us. And if that doesn't get somebody's attention on a brand, I don't know what will. But we think of managing our distributors as literally a 365 business. So not just sending emails, but sending thank you notes, right? Saying, hey, I was just in your market because I was visiting my grandmother and we went to dinner at XYZ and I saw my brand and thank you very much. Or I happened to run into XYZ retail store. He wasn't familiar with my brand, so I left him my card and I left him some brochures. It would be nice if you followed up. And oh, by the way, here's the owner's name and here's the owner's number. The things that you would do normally, if it were just you on an island, right? How would you grow your business? One of the key things that we have a lot of our clients talk about as well, I thought that was the distributor's job. And yeah, I guess it is. It's technically their job. But at the end of the day, it's your brand. And you know your brand better than anybody. Now, the distributor knows the market better than anybody, but they don't own your brand, you do. And so we take ownership, we ask our clients to take ownership on the full spectrum of where their brand lives and where their brand goes. And the last piece is applying the learning. And this is a kind of a broad concept, but it starts with understanding the numbers, seeking out the numbers, right? When you send your product you get an order from a distributor, it would be nice if, to on a monthly or regular basis to say, how did you do this month? If they're not sending you reports, you should ask for it. And if they're sending you reports without any sort of context, you need to ask for that context. That's part of what distributors do. And if they don't have the time to give you that information and insight, it's time to move on from your distributor. Because with this consolidated world, with all these distributors having too many SKUs and not enough people, it is incumbent on us to do a lot of the work, but the distributor owns all that information, and it is incumbent upon them, even if it's a data dump, to send it to you so that you can work through it, or have your good consultants like BEP work through it for you. But owning the information and knowing the information is really important as you move forward in scaling your business. I hope that helps.
It does, for sure. So how often would you suggest that breweries meet with their distributors? Is it enough to do a planning session for the next year, or should you meet with them quarterly? What's your recommendation there?
Well, the model that we use is let's just start at the end of the year. So starting around July, August, you're pulling your numbers together, taking a look at your year-to-dates and where you think you're going to end up the year. O&D for every distributor is a living nightmare, right? It's the Christmas season. Everybody's buying incrementally. Everybody's buying on impulse. But you should start around September, introducing your distributor to your objectives and your expectations for your next year. And that is, here's my strategy, here are my objectives, and here are my tactics, right? That's all a little one-page story. And along the right column is my objectives are, I want to grow from 2,000 cases to 3,000 cases. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's my mix this year, and here are my top retail accounts. Here are my top on-premise accounts. You're not going to be in 100%, right? So if there are 50 retail accounts that do 98% of the business in your area, and you're only in 5 of them, go seek the other 5, right? Build incrementally, but be specific about what your objectives are. And then you measure it. We measure every month. Every single month we look at the report, and we literally run a scoreboard for our distributors. So we all agreed we're going to do 3,000 this year. January, you're at 1,000. That was amazing. How are we going to get to the other 2,000? So you line up your programs and you measure with your distributor every month. And some months you're high, or some months you're low. If you're beating your numbers every month, congratulations. Why not take that goal to 4,000? If you aren't making your goals on a monthly basis, well, that needs some remedial action. And that's where you go in and sit down with your distributor and say, program A wasn't executed, why not? Or program A was executed, it didn't work, why not? What else can we do together to make it happen? And so that's where you have to get creative with your budgets. You get creative with your programming, and you need to kind of work with your distributor to help get these things going.
So should some of this stuff be built into your contract up front to be sure that you can get some of that, some of the time of day if you're a smaller fish in a really big pond?
So yeah, we get that question a lot, and unfortunately, distributors really hold the club, right? They're bigger, they've got more resources, and they control those contracts. What we have learned is that it's not there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law, and unfortunately, there are a lot of brand owners who say, look, I gave you the contract and I gave you my brand. It's up to you. You go get it done. But the reality with distributors is that, they've got big brands that they've got to keep they've got to, make sure that they're satisfying those needs. It might be, in the old days, it was Budweiser, in our world, it's, a Diageo house, right? So every distributor has Jack Daniels, a Jim Beam, a Johnny Walker, a Tito's that they have to take care of. But after that, after the first 4 hours of the day, what are they going to do the rest of the day, right? And it's those brands and those suppliers that are more prepared, more strategic, more planful, and really better, better organized, that get the attention from the distributor. We know that for a fact. I mean, when we were building the MGP brand, no one knew what MGP was. They knew we were a very famous distillery, but they didn't know our brands because they never had any before. But we came into every distributor meeting better prepared than the Brown-Formans of the world and the Constellations of the world and the Diageos of the world. And so they had to listen to us because we had everything ready. We prepared with sales, sales markers, with POS, with layout of the market. And I know it's hard work to do that, but if you do that hard work up front, the distributor has no other excuse but to go and execute because you've given them a clear path. And so we spend a lot of time talking to our clients and brand owners on, I don't have time to do that. Well, you got to make the time, right? Because if you have the time to make an incredibly great product and put it in a beautiful package, right, and price it correctly, you got to, you're responsible for talking to your consumer, right, through social media and your tasting room and your local events. You should be equally responsible for talking to your distributor and bringing him into the fold and telling him the story of the brand so that he's encouraged to go sell.
If you're advocating for kind of that balance between being available to your distributor, preparing stuff for your distributor, being in the market with your distributor, how do you kind of balance that? When is too much? What is too much?
Yeah. So too much. Look, I think too much is when you're calling them every week, going, "Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that?" Right? Or saying, "I want to meet with you every week." A lot of relationships, especially thanks to our pandemic world and post-pandemic world, is jumping on a Zoom call like this. Distributors love doing that now, right? I need 30 minutes of your time. I'm sending you the deck now. Here's what we're going to talk about. They're like, okay, we can go make that happen. The days of big general sales meetings and having, the entire sales force on, in the warehouse on a Friday morning and running through brand stuff, I think those days are gone. But by engaging your distributor through social media, by, connecting with them and following them, encouraging the sales force to follow you, by having standing monthly meetings, even if they're 15 or 20 minutes, it builds a pattern of responsibility and expectation on both parties.
Do you still suggest the old school tasting training?
Absolutely. Liquid to lips is really, really important. There are a lot of distributors that just can't do that or won't do that now because of COVID. But anytime you can get in front of them and do the hands-on training is really helpful. One thing we've learned and seen from some of our clients is that they drag their distributor into learning by actually going around them and doing wait staff training sessions on premise and inviting the distributor to come in and be a part of that. And it does two things. It teaches the distributor about the product, but it also introduces the distributor to some of the people in this account they may not have met or may not have even been to the account yet. So you're doing kind of a double, social service for your distributor and for your account.
So advocating for feet on the street and initiating a lot of the account work and a lot of the connections.
Look, I know that feet on the street is incredibly expensive, and we are not advocating to go out there and get your own sales force, because some of the reasons why you lead with a distributor is because you can't afford to right now to hire feet on the street. But what you can do as the owner is afford yourself the time to get to know the principals, to get to that market occasionally, once a quarter, get into your key market, understand who your key distributor, your key account is. I mean, let me give you an easy example. In the state of Illinois, and in the city of Chicago, Benny's Liquor Depot is 40% of the entire industry. And if you're not familiar with Benny's and you're selling in Illinois, whether I don't care what your beverage is, you better get to Illinois and you better get to a Benny's, because they are the drivers of the industry, period. And getting to know a couple of the key accounts, like key stores like Marcy Street and Roosevelt, or Grand Avenue, and introducing yourself and leaving your card is going to pay you dividends for years to come. Trust me, it works every time, because they're going to pick up the phone if you're being distributed by, River City or somebody like that, or Eagle Distributing, and they're like, hey, I just saw the owner of this brewery. Wow, he's a really great guy. She's a really great person. Why didn't you ever tell me about them? And why don't I ever see you, Mr. Distributor? I mean, it works both ways.
Interesting. Well, I can keep asking questions, and I will, but I want to give everybody else an opportunity. Julie, thanks for being here. I know you and I have done distributor, juggling for a long time as well. Candace, Andy, Dana.
Yeah.
I know.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was over in the Minter thing giving feedback, and then I left to come over here. So apologies that I'm late.
Oh, thank you. No worries at all. Any questions? Jeff or Andy, we haven't dialed into chains. Do you guys work with a lot of chain stores and larger accounts like that, or do you mostly focus on independent or restaurants?
Yeah, so we go where our clients go, and so if you're like a California winery, 80% of on and off premise is chain. So if you're not in the chains, you're not selling anything, right? But we have clients that are focused more on premise to start with, which is great, and those are independent primarily. And then we have general market, clients. But we do believe, look, one sort of truth that I think is universal in our industry is that brands, right, are discovered and built on premise, and they're scaled off premise. So we're big fans of on premises. Get in there and get your beer on tap, get a custom cocktail on the list, but get liquid to lips. And the best way to do that is at a bar and a restaurant, because that's where people are relaxed. That's where friends are influencing their friends to try something new, and it works. It's magic. And you get a couple of bartenders that really get behind your product. I mean, it prints money. I mean, when we were launching George Remus Bourbon in Chicago, we happened to, one of our very intrepid market managers got it into Harry Carey's, and the lead bartender fell in love with it, introduced it to the owner of Harry Carey's. He fell in love with it, and the rest of it is literally history. They took it as they sent it out to every single. They have 7 stores. They actually opened a mini restaurant in the middle of, I think it was the B terminal at Midway, and they brought us along. I mean, talk about a miracle. You got people from all over the country flying through Midway, and they're trying George Remus Bourbon. I mean, we were getting calls from Utah. We were getting calls from California. When are you coming? We want your beer. We want your bourbon. So, it's working on premises to us, is critical.
So do you advocate a lot of promotional calendars? And Candace, I'm going to tag here really quickly about promotional laws are different in every state, correct?
Yeah, they are. There are various promotions. I mean, in Texas, everything is illegal. In Illinois, nothing's illegal except for giving free goods. But I'd be sarcastic, but not very much. It all starts with a plan, right? You plan from the bottom up. And so with our clients, we work with them on organizational planning calendars. What is your promotion, right? How does your promotion work at retail and on premise? What are you going to do from a social media standpoint? What does your product calendar look like? How is your product cycle going to be influenced seasonally? How is it going to be and geographically? Yeah, we're all about planning. It is literally from the bottom up. And you start at the brewery, you start at the distillery, you start at the winery, what do we want to accomplish, right? And we do have an interesting model. It's on our website, but brandelixirpartnership.com. But it's the strategic, they're concentric circles, right? You know, you start with a strategic plan, and that follows a product plan, and that follows a consumer plan, and then that follows a customer plan. And finally, you get to your distributor management plan, right? And it all starts with, what do I want to be when I grow up? And you just have to continue to draw the line right through the product, the marketing mix and the product mix.
What do you think was the most important thing to focus on during the pandemic, and how are things changing? Is it the result of the pandemic or just major consolidation? And is that because of the pandemic? What's your take on that?
Consolidation has been going on for 30 years. So it's just as premiumization in beer and wine and spirits has happened, consolidation has been going on. I think what happened with the pandemic is that it invited an opportunity for distributors to consolidate internally around areas and channels that they wanted to be in. So one of the first things we saw was that, you know, the demise of on-premise, right? People aren't going to bars to drink because, you know, everyone's in quarantine. And so that forced distributors to get rid of their on-premise teams. They've brought back those teams at about 10% of what they once were. And they moved everything else into telesales. But it did give them the opportunity to strengthen their outreach to retail. And so, you know, part of the your distributor selection process moving forward is you should interview them. You know, it's not, I know there's a lot of consolidation. There's usually, you know, 1, 2, 3 distributors per state, but where you have choice, you need to challenge them. You need to ask the hard questions. If you want to be an on-premise only brand, you should go to a distributor that knows on-premise, that understands, you know, high-end craft, you know, that has worked the on-premise channel for a long time and doesn't just drop off boxes and sell on a deal. And that it takes work, right? It takes work to figure that one out. But once you've done it, right, it pays dividends to you.
True. Julie, any questions? Anybody else?
No questions. I think like what I see a lot is like because I train sales reps, right? And I get a lot of young folks, and I'll just go ahead and say this, and I don't know how inconsiderate this is, but I'll just throw it out there. But I'm finding a lot of like strategically, you know, brands are built in the on-premise, and like we have to, you know what I mean? Like there's these like certain like business principles, but I'm finding as I spend more time in this industry and generationally, when I work with sales teams, the younger folks don't seem to be grasping onto the principles that we're discussing here. And then it's you know, I'm just going to sell all the new and shiny things, and I'm not really looking at on and off premise, like all the kind of business principles just like go out the window. I just find it really interesting that there's like this dichotomy of sort of like us on this call that are like, you know, these things work. Like you have to, you know, and some stuff takes time, and, you know, and the way that we work with distributors. And I find some of the teams that I work with, it's just constant pushback, like prospecting doesn't work. We don't need to add new business, like all this different stuff. And it just sort of makes me laugh. I'm sorry if that's like a meta thing that I'm putting out there. I'm just listening to you speak about like, we know brands are built in on-premise, you know, we know like sort of go-to things like that, and that you do have to use marketing and stuff like that. But I feel like a lot of the times these smaller brands that are growing, bringing on inexperienced salespeople that are not trained properly, and then they're just sort of like flailing around willy-nilly, is really hurting some of these brands. You know?
Well, and and Julie, I completely agree with you, and we've seen that as well. Just a couple of thoughts here is, first of all, those young people are a product of how they're trained, right? They're mimicking either what they've been told or how they've been shown. So to me, that's an indictment on distributor leadership, not so much on Gen Zs, although I own one of those Gen Zs. The challenge you've got here, I think, let me just a couple of things, right? You're not completely helpless, right? You can manage your margins to a distributor to show him the right way to sell, right? You can put more margin against on-premise through your depletion allowance or through promotion allowance, or by the way, we're only supporting taps. Here's 5,000 taps. Here's 5,000, coasters, right? Well, where's my POS? Where's my, poster for the package store? We're not doing that this year. This is what you got, So here's a tap handle. Find an empty tap, right? The other piece is using data, right? The marketplace, you should be able to access how many merchandisable accounts there are, how many bars, with draft are there, right? And let's just say in Omaha, Nebraska, there are 400 of those bars. Well, you start with bar number 1 and you start working your distributor to say, how many can you get? Well, we only call on 10. Well, why is that? Well, the other 390 are bankrupt. Well, we know that's not true, right? But there's going to be a happy medium between I only call on 10 and how can we get some of the other 390? Because if they don't, I would suspect that you got the wrong distributor. So there's always a way to skin this argument to your advantage.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think that there's a lot of retraining that needs to happen as well. And we see a lot of that if reps are trained in a certain way, in a certain space with a certain product, if they come over into working for a distributor or working for a craft beer brand, perhaps there's a different way of selling. So is there a certain amount of maybe a better question for you, Andy, would be when you're recommending a type of distributor that you want your craft beer brands to be looking for, are you looking for smaller? Are you looking for a bigger house that has a specialty division? How do you find people that understand how to sell craft beer?
Let me answer that question in a couple of ways, but I saw somebody just put a comment on it, getting data is really hard. You're right, data is hard, but every distributor, I don't care what size, they have data for you. All right. So before you go, I'm not saying go out and spend $10,000 on Nielsen data, but the data that your distributor has, I think, by contract, they have to share that with you. And if it's not in the contract, you need to get it written into your contracts as moving forward, right? Because how can you be an effective supplier to your distributor if you don't have the data to go make the right decisions with them? All right. Because the days of, I'm so old, but at business school, they taught us about mushroom management, where you keep people in the dark and feed them lots of to make them grow. That doesn't exist anymore. So going back to your question on how to choose a distributor, Laura, is a lot of this is what do you want, right? What do you want with your brand? Okay. I'm trying to think of an example. Well, I'll give you an example from my past life. Sonoma-Cutrer. Sonoma-Cutrer is everyone considers it a very high-end. I've just lost you. Hold on.
I didn't lose you.
Okay, I lost these. So can you guys hear me?
Yep,
all right.
Absolutely.
So let me give you an example. Sonoma-Cutrer was a craft Chardonnay. It was built entirely to be on premise. And the way they managed that we are going to be 90% on premise and 10% retail. And there was a list of very specific lists.
We just lost you. I think your headphones are trying to work.
Oh,
there we go.
yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Better
Yeah.
without them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So we built very specific paradigms around which you could only be accepted as a retailer or as a on-premise account for Sonoma-Cutrer if you met these various criteria. Now, they weren't onerous, but they were very specific, right? That your wines on list had to range between $25 and $75 because our list price was always between 30 and 34. You know, and by the way, the only way to sell at retail was, did you have knowledgeable wine stewards, right? If you don't, we're not going to sell you, right? So never went to Costco, never went to Sam's, right? We wanted to stay in small package stores. But those are criteria that were important. They were the essence of the brand. I think you guys have criteria and core characteristics of your brands that you can evoke, that you can literally put in writing. We are XYZ Craft Brewery. We stand for the following. This is how consumers look at our brand. Your distributor needs to understand that. You know, if all you sell is in growlers, you shouldn't be put on the shelf. You know, you should be put in the refrigerator. I'm just using bad examples here, but we as brand owners, we have more control than we realize. And it's the distributor who wrests that control for us when we don't ask the right questions, right? Stand up for our rights or demand, that our brand be built in certain ways. Easier said than done, Andy. I'm just a little guy. I just started. I get it. But what we're talking about is you've got proof of concept. You own your neighborhood. You own your county, and you're about to own your state, right? What do you do as you start to scale past that?
So how to shape and represent yourself, how to build it, how to represent it, how to carry that forward to your distributor in a specific way.
Yes.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, I promised a hard stop, so I'm going to honor that. So to wrap up, first, thank you so much, Andy, for sharing your story and for being here today with us. Super appreciate that. A quick recap. First, thank you so much to White Labs for sponsoring us today. And one of the things Neva wanted me to make sure to point out to everybody is that they have a new dry yeast strain that's dropping at the end of the month, WLP066, which is London Fog. So if you're interested in checking out the dry yeast strains at all, or specifically the London Fog, you can go to their website, whitelabs.com, to the homepage to find out more information there. And briefly, again, what we have coming up last Tuesday and this Tuesday, we're talking about equipment and infrastructure on our podcast. So download last week or this week to hear Alex Smith, Brian Mollahan, and Chris Leach talk about equipment. Thanks to Wild Goose for sponsoring that podcast, and All About Beer is our partner there. Next resource group for your calendar is July 12th, and that's going to be Brandon Hernandez from San Diego Beer News. Next educational webinar, August 16th, Jeff O'Brien about how to raise investment capital for your brewery legally. And that's with Craft Beer Professionals is our partnership with those educational webinars. And then HomebrewCon, if you're in San Diego, we'll see you this week coming up. I'm pretty excited to be there on site, get to hang out with the crew and talk home brewing. What else? I think that kind of covers everything, but thank you again. I know it's June, so it's hard for people to make these in person, but I know a lot of people will be tuning in after the fact. So thank all of you for being here, and we'll see you in July. So have a great afternoon.
Laura, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you back, Andy.
Take care,
Thanks
guys.
for coming.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.